We had 3 strong interviews on Monday. Looking forward to meeting 3 new candidates tonight. Again, I was very pleased with the overall interest in the superintendent position. We did have 33 applicants for the position, and I wanted to thank the Massachusetts Association of School Committees again for their assistance during this process, helping us with some vetting, getting some information, and helping establish our procedures and protocols that we're working under today. We're going to meet 3 more candidates tonight, and then we'll be meeting after the meeting as a school committee to look towards our next steps, and I look forward to doing that. Of the 33 candidates that submitted, we did choose 7 that are now reduced to 6 candidates for interviews, and very happy to have with us today Dr. Joshua Videla. Dr. Vadala, welcome. It's great to have you here. Thank you for your interest in sitting with us and your interest in the city of Peabody.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to start things off, then we're going to go around to all the different school committee members. Certainly at the end, we'd give you the opportunity to ask us any questions, or if you wanted to make a closing summary statement, we wanted to afford you that opportunity as well. So again, great to have you here. Your resume is terrific, and we really wanted to learn more about you as a candidate and to hear what your thoughts are on some different questions you get. So,
absolutely.
Great. Why don't we first start off with, and I always like to start off with a financial question right off the bat. So if you could maybe walk us through your background, your experience in handling school budgets, how kind of maybe walk it through for us, how you've handled it in Revere. I know you're an assistant superintendent in Revere currently. Maybe walk us through that, your involvement in Chapter 70, just the whole process. If you could maybe walk us through that for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've had the pleasure in Revere of having a seat at the table and being part of the entire budget process. So in Revere, most of our budget has been tied to the Chapter 70 funds, and we typically don't spend any money over net school spending. So over time, Revere was hit very hard with the change in from low income to economically disadvantaged. So we really worked hard with the legislation on the Student Opportunity Act. So that was something that we really worked on. In terms of our year-to-year budget, since I oversee special education and transportation as part of my role, I always have a big part in the discussion around the budget. We usually start our internal talks in December. We meet with our school business official, and we have our talks about our priorities and where we think we're at. And then really it hits the ground running in January as the governor's budget comes out. So that governor's budget gives us at least a floor, so we know where to start. We typically look at our budget in terms of if everybody returns, how much will it cost to do business the same as usual? We've had times where we've been at a $4 million deficit, a $6 million deficit, and then we really work hard around what are some of the grant opportunities that we have, what are the federal grants, where are they coming in, what is some of our circuit breaker reimbursement under special education, how can that offset some of the costs? And then what we really try to do then is to try to figure out how many people in our payroll that might be towards retirement age. We have a February 1st in our teacher's contract to notify us for an early retirement incentive. So once people notify us of their retirement, and then they may be replaced by a brand new teacher or a new hire, so it's a fluid process, but we have some fluctuation there. And in a large district of 8,000 students with over 1,000 employees, the swings are big. And so some of that really takes into account. We're in a very unique opportunity this year where with the SOA money, we have some found money for the first time. So we had a community budget meeting, and we're really working on our process around how do we prioritize what the needs are. For so long, we had tight budget times, and we had to make really difficult decisions. And when we make those decisions during those tough times, we had to say, what are our values? And so we always say, do what's best for kids. And I know in Peabody, it's every student every day. And when you think about every student every day, what is going to have the most impact? And so we always valued people. And we said, we're going to invest in people over things. And so if we had to cut certain items around, if we could get away with not doing cafeteria furniture or not ordering paper supplies and things like that and look to the community for some outreach and some donations, we could save people. If there was a little bit of an attrition, we could save people. As far as our professional development money, if we could build our capacity and get our teachers who are experts to lead that and not pay outside consultants, again, we could trim off that and we could invest in people. And so that's really how the budget went. And for us, we don't vote our budget until May, so a lot of that money, is continuing with lobbying with the legislation around, the governor's number comes in, and then we wait for the House and the Senate, and we've really been tied to that. So it's been an iterative process, but it's been a really good process because when times were tight, we had to really work together to invest in the people that we have and build their capacity.
Great, thank you. So we have about 6,000 students here in our district in Peabody. You said Revere is about 8,000?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we have 11 schools, so six elementary, 3 middle. We have a big comprehensive high school of 2,000 and an alternative school with about 100. So I know Peabody's got has more elementary schools, but the one big middle.
The middle schools in Revere, they 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as well?
Yes, we have 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question I wanted to ask, something that I'm also very involved in, is collective bargaining. And I just wanted to ask about your experience with working with the different unions. I imagine Revere very similar to Peabody in terms of the different unions, about how you work, what's your strategy or your background in trying to achieve fair, balanced, collective bargaining contracts with our unions.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I think it's really important. And I think before the collective bargaining even starts, the relationship with the unions is so important. And so we have a standing meeting once a week where we meet and we discuss items proactively with the union presidents. With the paraprofessional union, we meet monthly. With the teachers union, we meet weekly just because of the sheer size. So in terms of collective bargaining, it's good to have positive relationships ahead of time. And what I try to think about is what are the priorities when we go into the collective bargaining unit, and we have five contracts that we negotiate, and so we've done those over time. We typically start with the teachers because it's our biggest contract and it sort of flows into the other ones. Our administrators is the next one because it's a smaller union. But when we look at it, we try to really bring people together. We did a close read of the contract with the administrators and our leadership team, and we said, where are some areas where the language is ambiguous, or where are you getting into some of these, headbutting things with the teachers union, and where can we clarify? What is the spirit of what this is meant to say, and how can we work on that? And so we did a close read with that. We did an exercise with the school committee where we did a close read along with that, and then we said, what are our priorities? What are the things that we really want to have? So during the last collective bargaining, we really put value on teacher collaboration. So we worked into our contracts for all teachers across the district, and it's really especially elementary school, for teachers to have a prep period every day, but also, we call it professional learning groups, or PLG, but a collaboration period with their team. We worked it into the collective bargaining, we understood how it was going to impact, and there was always some give and take. So we want to get to a point where it's fair and equitable, and of course, the big issue is always the money, and you work out some of the other issues, but we wanted to really put the value on that and value people as individuals and as professionals. And understanding that first contract really impacts the other contracts, and so you want to make sure that if you're going to do for one union, then you're going to have to do that for other unions, and how that is going to financially impact the budget. Mm-hmm. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go around and open it up to the school committee. Let's first start off with you, Mr. Amico.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, before we start, I'd like to make a quick statement. As many people know, I am a teacher in Revere. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Vadala for about 20 years. Am I not on?
Yeah, we make sure we all hold the microphones pretty close. They all should be.
I'm not even on, so, all right.
Start over, Mr. Amico.
All right. So before we start, I just wanted to, as many people know, I'm a teacher in Revere, almost 20 years, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Vadala for that time. So when I saw that he was a candidate for superintendency, I wanted to make sure that I just checked whether or not I could be here for this particular interview, and also for a potential vote. So what I did was I contacted the MASC, and I also contacted Peabody Legal Counsel, and I was basically told that I could be here and interview and possibly vote if I had to. So that's why I'm here.
Well, we're glad to have you, Mr. Amico.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Where else would I be? With that, I just want to say, Dr. Vadala, thank you for being here. You have a tremendous resume. I've known you a long time. When I first started teaching, you were one of my mentors. I'll be honest, I didn't know what I was doing in my first day, and you and several other teachers really were there for me, so I really appreciate it looking back, and just thank you. Congratulations on being here. We had 33 applicants. You're one of 6 that we're interviewing. I guess the question that I want to ask you, Dr. Vadala, is the value of a principal in a building. The value of a principal in a building. How would you, and because it's such an important position, how would you support our principals? Because the head of the school really dictates, not so much dictates, but sets the tone for the true great people in that building, the teachers and the support staff that really make it happen for children. So if you could just get into how your support and your guidance of principals over the years, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Miko. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. This is such an important question because the leader of a building really dictates what happens in a building. And I've seen that, when I was at the school level, and I see that when I work with principals now. And one of my favorite parts of my current job is I field phone calls all day long from principals. And I talk to almost every principal every day. And it's really important to me to be in touch with the principals and understand what's going on. We recently applied for a grant in Revere around strengthening principal leadership. So I've gotten some really good PD. We're currently in that, and we're going to roll out some professional development for the principals. And one of the things that they've said that was really eye-opening to me is they broke down the leadership of a principal into 3 core areas. So one is instructional improvement. So you have to be an instructional leader, and you have to be able to have an instructional vision and be able to lead that. The second one is the student culture, being able to, as a principal, manage student culture, manage student behaviors, and make sure that there's a positive student culture so that the students can learn. And that you can't be a strong instructional leader unless the students are learning. And the third part, which a lot of principals have a struggle with because they didn't go to school for this, but it's the adult management. And so when you think of instructional management, student management, student culture, and adult culture, that adult culture is really important. Teachers need to feel supported. They need to be given clear feedback and how they can improve, and they need to feel appreciated. And I think that it can go either way. A building, you can walk into a building and you get a feeling of it. And you can get a feeling that this is a good place to learn. And this is a place where I want my kids to be. And I think you can see that the teachers have done that. And I can see through my own children, walking in and seeing throughout a change of leadership that when there's a positive principal in there, the teachers are happy, there's no stress, and they can do the job. The job of a teacher is very difficult. And being able to support the principal as the leader of the district is one of the most important jobs that you can have. And I really enjoy doing it, and I think that it's something that we need to really talk about and also focus on those 3 areas. Be explicit with principals about that and figure out where they need support because everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And so if they have certain strengths, then we want to be able to support those. And if they have areas for improvement, what we want to do is create structures that they can collaborate together and learn from one another.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Miko. Mr. Arnottis? Yeah, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Vadala. Happy to have you here. I want to talk to you just about your management style, your leadership style. Could you tell us a little bit how you operate as a manager, and if you have any stories of a time or a crisis you might have faced and how you handled that, or a problem you had to solve and had to step in and run that? Any backstory you might have would be appreciated.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. So I think my leadership style is one of developing a culture of high expectations. I hold myself to really high expectations, and I feel like as a leader, you have to be out there on the front line. You have to walk the walk. You have to stand by what you do. And I think that has served me well. I try to build positive relationships, get to know people, who they are, what makes them tick, what they do outside of work as well, because I think that goes a long way. You sort of invest in that, emotional piece. You invest in that relationship, and I think you can use that along the way to help. When you need something, who are your go-to people? And so I think that in terms of facing a crisis or a potential thing, one thing that really comes to mind is things around school safety. So something that I'm very proud about in what we do in Revere is we work very closely with the police and the fire department and our first responders. And after the Parkland shooting, people were really upset and they were really scared, and they were nervous and they wanted to know what are you guys doing? And so we had a big meeting, and we invited people into the school committee meeting, and I did a presentation about what the emergency planning was, and I sort of peeled back the curtain a little bit and talked about our relationship. We had the chief of police there, we had the fire chief there, and we talked about some of the enhanced drills that we do, some of the tabletop discussions that we do, some of the practice things that we do in order to prepare and keep kids safe. We also talked about what our philosophy is about school safety and how we want to keep kids, first, the physical plant, we want to keep the physical plant safe, but we also want to have this emotional safety and psychological safety for students. So we don't want to have a school like a prison. We still want it to be a school, but we want it to be able to be safe along the outside, to have that perimeter safe, but also to, support kids and make them feel comfortable there. So people really upset about that, and I'm sure that happened in Peabody as well. And we wanted to reach out to people, get the principals on board. How can we support you? What are people nervous about? How can we protect them? We worked very closely with the police to say, we're going to increase our police presence. We're going to, work together and show everybody that we're one unit, we're one city, and we're here to protect your kids. And, I think that served us well by building that trust with the families and saying this is something that we're doing, and we're all facing this crisis. I think, currently what we're dealing with right now is another example.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Vadala. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter.
Given the circumstances, is where most of us are at home right now. One of the things that I like to ask a candidate and talk about is being vested in Peabody, the reasons why you're applying. I see the superintendent role as something that's very much a very large public figure, somebody who builds relationships with the students, with the staff, somebody that's really out and about and is seen. So my question to you is, why Peabody? What do you know about us? I do realize that you do live here, so this question might be a little bit easier for you. Is there anything that you've identified in our district that you really, really find interesting, or that you think needs improvement, just those type of things?
Absolutely. So this is the first time I've had the question, why Peabody? So 10 years ago, my family, my wife and I decided, where do we want to live? Where do we want to settle? And we asked why Peabody. And this was an area that we chose to come to. I grew up on the North Shore. My wife grew up in Burlington, so this was somewhere that was in the middle. But Peabody, we were drawn here because we thought Peabody would be a great place to bring up a family. And I have to say, Peabody's exceeded our expectations. And so when I think about now, in my current role, why Peabody, why the superintendent, I think about three real big areas that have exceeded my expectations in Peabody, and that's pride, and that's support and opportunity. And Peabody has incredible pride. Something that, everybody says that they have pride, but Peabody is like no other. And there's a lot of pride with the people who have grown up here, with the people who have moved here. They want to be part of Peabody, and they want to be part of the different things that are going on. And support. Support is incredible, not only from the city in the schools, but from the different community organizations. I think of the Peabody Education Foundation as an example of, just a great example of the city coming together and giving back to the schools. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough year for our city, and it's been amazing how the city has pulled together and supported one another and, really just rallied around one another to help each other heal. And to me, this is an opportunity. And this is an opportunity for me to give back. And it's an opportunity where Peabody exceeded my expectations. It's now my time to try to exceed Peabody's expectations of me in the superintendency. And so I really, invested in this community. I'm here, I'm visible. And I think in terms of visibility, I'm in the community now. But I also think about visibility and accessibility, and there's a difference. You could be out at an event and you could be visible, but you could be not approachable. And I think in my role and in the people that I've dealt with, I'm extremely accessible. So I'm able to be contacted, and I have an open door policy. I meet with parents all the time. I meet with the principals, meet with teachers if I need to, and I'm out there, but I'm also approachable. So I think that I'm vested in the community, but the visibility is important. The accessibility is even more important.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vidala. I work in Revere as well, although I don't recall ever meeting you. I don't think we've ever met before.
I don't think so.
But I do know a lot of the people who you've listed as references or have written letters of reference for you in your application. So I want to talk to you about two things, if I may.
Sure.
And the reason I'm going to ask you for two things is you've had the benefit of 48 hours since our initial round of interviews, and a lot of these questions are going to be relatively similar, and I don't know whether you've watched. You also are a Peabody resident and have access to our local television broadcast. I don't know whether you've watched it or not, nor does it matter. But so the first question I want to ask you is, regarding something similar to what Mr. Onotis talked to you about a situation you've been involved in, where there was some urgency and stress, and we do have the perfect situation we're living in right now, and you kind of alluded to that in general, but I want to ask you specifically, if we took you back, 120 hours or whatever would be 144 hours, so we're back at last Thursday, and we're getting information in from various sources, and you are our superintendent, and we're looking to you as a school committee for direction. Principals are looking at you for direction. The staff are looking at you for direction. Union leaders are looking at you, and talk to me about how you handle all that.
Sure. Can I go back a week further?
You can go back, yeah, good. Tell me how we put this together.
We had the unique opportunity in Revere of having an international trip over February vacation. And prior to their return, we contacted the CDC and we contacted the Department of Public Health, and we asked for guidance. And the guidance at the time was to, we went over the itinerary of the students, and there was no exposure, and so they were able to return to school. And so we made the decision to return to school, and that caused some concern in the community because people had a lot of questions. And so, again, we went into the experts and talked to the experts and what we should do, and the mayor asked if I would go to the Board of Health meeting that night. And so I went to the Board of Health meeting on that Tuesday, and on the Tuesday I talked about why we made the decision that we made and how we communicated that to people, and this was important, and we were able to sort of ease some tension, and people felt good. And so that was nice. And then 2 days later, we got a call from the CDC, and actually it was Mass Department of Public Health, and they said, actually, we've changed our guidance, and we should retroactively quarantine everybody. So everybody who went on the trip who have been in school for 7 days should stay home. So that caused a bit of concern, and so there were high school students, and it happened to be, of course everything happens at the same time, 3 p.m. on Thursday, and it's parent-teacher night. So, we banded together, we got, the team together, we talked about it, and we said, okay, we're going to send out an all-call so that people are aware of this, we're going to draft a letter. We contacted some colleagues who were also in the same thing with the state. We said, we don't make these decisions in isolation. We make sure that we ask people who are experts in this area what their guidance is, and their guidance has changed, and we're going to continue to what we did is follow their guidance. So we were able to get out a letter to families, we did an all-call to families, and then I went with the high school principal, and we stood in front of the faculty at 4:30, and we said, we know parents are coming at 5. This is just, it's real-time information. This is what we're dealing with. And so it was important for me to be there, and it was important for me to listen, and it was important for me to say, what are your concerns? And I got to tell you, the staff was incredible. They really stepped up, and they said, we're in this together. We know this wasn't your decision. We know that parents are going to be nervous. Can you give us some talking points? And we had a discussion, and we gave them some talking points, and we said, this is real time. We don't have all the answers, but what we're going to do is we're going to utilize what we have. So fast forward again to the following Thursday when more information came out. There was a meeting with the mayors, and the governor was having a conference call in Pittsfield at 2 p.m., and the next morning there was a call with the commissioner. And so the information that the mayors got was really good. And so we're in close contact with our mayor, and we talked to the mayor, and he said, there's going to be information coming down that we should shut down on Monday. And we don't know what's going on. And so we had a conversation, and we said, if we're shutting down on Monday and it's Thursday, why are we asking people to come in tomorrow? So we made the decision early to keep people home on Friday, to keep them safe, and we met with the union, and we brought them in. We said, what do you think? And they said, it's 3 o'clock. You can't tell teachers they can't come back. They're not ready. And they said, can we have a staff day? It was their idea. And we said, absolutely. So we put together some expectations around giving staff time to meet together, giving staff time to plan, to upload things, and giving them enough time. So we developed a plan that's going to be launched tomorrow. Our teachers have pushed out some information, but we're doing a whole online learning platform. We basically modeled it after Wakefield's Learn Anywhere, where there's one place to log on, you click on the school, then you click on the grade, or you click on the level, and teachers have populated Google Documents with all the resources. And that way it was at least a thoughtful way to get information, and we're continuing to update the information There's a call and a letter going out to parents because we had to talk about meals, we had to talk about technology. If you don't have technology, we're going to let you borrow a device. We're going to set up a time for you to come in. Our tech guys have wiped them out, so they're ready to go. And so we were handing out devices today. We're doing bagged breakfast and lunch every day, and we got our online curriculum. So real cohesive plan, but it took a long time, but we wanted to make sure it was very thoughtful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I did want to hit a second point. Yeah, so, and it's really because of, the second point I want to talk to you about is because of your career. And you have some interesting stops along the way. And I really want you to talk or tell me what your thoughts are. And knowing Revere fairly intimately, and there are a lot of similarities between Revere's demographics and Peabody's demographics. You have some affluent areas, you have some less affluent areas, you have some high ELL in certain areas and things like that. So tell us what your thoughts are in terms of how do you, as a superintendent, ensure that there's equity in all your, particularly elementary schools, maybe your middle schools, but you have 3 and they're in different neighborhoods, different locations across the city. So how do you ensure that there's equity among the student population and staff, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that every school has their own unique culture and has their own, you know, unique set of circumstances. And in terms, I always think of equity in terms of making sure we have equitable access, but also making sure that we have high expectations. And so how do we consistently have high expectations for all of our students while providing the appropriate supports? So creating these rigorous tasks for kids to do, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless of their ability levels, really challenging everyone, but providing scaffolding supports along the way. And so there are some students in our district that need more support than others, and we want to deploy resources towards that. You know, I mean, you think of Peabody, every student, every day, you have to figure out what do kids need to be successful, and that's important. And so you have to prioritize. You know, we have an elementary school that may, you know, as we're looking at the SOA money, we may be able to add positions now. And so depending on the size and the need, some schools may get more positions than others. And that's okay, because we can stand by that, because some kids need more support. And we want to make sure we have programs to meet those needs, but we also want to say, you know, one thing we always say is, whose voice isn't being heard? Who's not at the table? And we want to be able to do that, you know, and we want to be able to ask about how can we support kids better? And so I think that in terms of equity, everybody's not going to get the same thing. And that's okay, but everybody should be pushed to high levels.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman.
Thank you.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Vadala. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I got a two-pronged question. One is special education. How would you handle a situation where you had a parent that went through the proper chain of command, and they had a situation with their student, or their child, I should say, and they weren't satisfied with the outcome? They went right through the special education director, and they still weren't satisfied with the way things went, and they reach out to you, and you review the case, and you listen to the parent, and you conclude that you agree with the parent. And how would you handle that particular situation? Also, too, if you can talk in general about some of the special education programs that you've implemented in the past and you were part of.
Absolutely, thank you. Excellent question. And so, you know, this may surprise you, but I've gotten that phone call a number of times.
Yeah,
And,
right.
You
So
know, my
have I.
current role, you know, and I think regardless of when a parent comes in, their goal is to get what's best for their kid. You know, they really want to see what's successful. And, you know, in terms of the situation that you've given, if they've gone through the proper channels and there is something that's missing, you know, what I would do is listen. You know, I wouldn't meet with the parent because I always meet with parents. But I wouldn't make any decisions outside of the team process. And I tell them that, you know, I don't have the authority. I'm not part of the team.
Right.
But I can listen to you and I can give you some recommendations. And so in a case like that, I would listen. I would take some notes. I would also do my research, do my background, and figure out how the team meeting went, what happened, who did you contact, you know, what is some of the background. I'd read through the testing reports and things like that. One, just because I like to do that. I like to know about the data, and I'm interested in using that data to figure out how do we meet the best needs of the student. So then the parent would go on their way, and I would convene the people who need to be at the table, and we would talk it through and say, you know, my recommendation for the parent would be, if you have a disagreement here, you can reject the IEP. I would let her know what her rights are. You can reject the IEP, and prior to going to mediation or anything like that, you should request a reconvene at the team meeting. So then I would meet with my team, and we would talk about all the different things that we have, and this happens quite a bit. And, you know, we come to some consensus, you know, what does this student need, and then we'll talk about it, and the delivery of that message will be from the team. They're the ones working with that parent and working with that, so the hero gets to be the teacher and the team, because that's the most important thing. They have that ongoing relationship. And so I don't want to set a situation where people are always coming to the superintendent to solve problems. So you have to go back to who's dealing with the student the most. And I can be a support, and I can talk through problems, and I can work with you, but you have to make the decision that's right for the student. And if there's a resource issue and we can help to alleviate some of that, you still need to make the best decision within the team process and let them go back to the team process and do that.
Okay. Good.
So, thank you. And then for the second part, my first year in this current role, I have two assistant directors underneath me that work with special education. One does pre-K through 5, and the other does 6 through 12. And the first year, we really wanted to look at our sub-separate programming, and we were outplaced at a lot of kids. And we did over 100 observations of our, we call them small learning groups, across the district in our 6 elementary schools, our 3 middle schools, and our high school. And we did these observations, and I created a little template, and we worked on looking at what are the teacher behaviors, what are the student behaviors, and what are the paraprofessional behaviors, because all the classrooms had support for paraprofessional. And we found that in some classrooms, the paraprofessionals were really being utilized as professionals, and other ones, they were just kind of taking notes. And so we were able to try to create some opportunities around that for professional development. The next thing that we did was really create clear entrance and exit criteria for these programs so that the right kids were in the right fit. And so that way, you weren't just tossing a kid into a program, but you actually had a reason for that student to be there. And then finally, when we looked at our early childhood program, I noticed that we had 21 kids who were outplaced my first year that were 3 or 4 years old. And so what does that say to a family? You know, and it wasn't because we couldn't meet their needs. There were maybe 4 or 5 that had significant needs that required, you know, an out-of-district placement, but we just didn't have space. So what we did is we looked at our integrated preschool, where we had 7 classrooms and they weren't all full, and we were able to meet the needs of the kids within 6, and we were able to add, so we had 3 small learning group classes, 2 for autism and 1 for kids with multiple disabilities. And we were able to create another one in that life skills track, and that the following year ended up, we staffed it with a teacher and 3 paraprofessionals, and they were able to bring kids back into the district, and it really helped because we didn't see that exodus at the beginning. And then how do you say to a family, no, come back, trust us, we can help you. So it was better, it was a much better relationship right from the get-go.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you. Hi, Dr. Vidala.
Hi, Mrs. Dunn.
I want to start off with an apology. When you were explaining what happened in relation to our current virus crisis, and you explained how everything happened just as you were getting ready for parent-teacher conferences, and I probably sounded like I laughed. Honestly, I could think of nothing other than, oh my God, what an awful time for that to happen. So it was an emotional outburst in support and complete
appreciate
sympathy
that.
for what
Absolutely.
happened. Oh my goodness.
I was about to yell at you for laughing.
I thought so.
was
I know.
very
I
upset
thought,
with
oh
you.
my goodness, it probably didn't sound right, but, you know, the timing is everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to laugh. I mean,
Yeah, actually, and it couldn't have happened at a better time, of course. But thank you for coming. I have a question for you. So much of the material that comes down from DESE is always requiring, you know, a very big structure, SMART goals, assessments, who's responsible, yada, yada, yada. And my question to you is, when formulating, you know, the district plan, the strategic plan, the school plans, the evaluations, the self-evaluation, or how would you go about that, of making sure that everything is on track?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And I think a lot of that has to do with the vision of the district, where the district is going. And I think that if I were to be fortunate enough to get the position of superintendent, it would really be part of my entry plan. So I would really want to work the first year having sort of a listening and learning tour, going to each school, meeting with each stakeholder. And this is what my superintendent did in Revere. And so, and Mr. Hockman, one of my recommendations was from Christine McGrath, who was my superintendent's, she was her mentor, she was also Kara's mentor. And, you know, I think that she really helped work through the process of having that listening and learning tour. And what we did is all the interviews that we did during that first year, we typed them up into into notes, and we put them into a Wordle. And whatever the biggest words were that kept coming out, that's where we created our SMART goals. So we created district goals based on all the feedback that we got. We created these district goals around 3 big buckets. For us, it was teaching all students, really meeting the needs of kids, building a community, and one was around assessment. And so we were able to create a district vision around what all the people had told us. And then our district improvement plan was based on those 3 areas. Then our principals created goals in those 3 areas. And then our teachers, we asked them to identify something that really resonates with you in one of these 3 big buckets, so that it was personal to them, but it was still aligned in the goal, and then we're all rowing together, and we're all heading in the same direction. So it's really having that clear vision, concise, you can say it 1, 2, 3, and then everybody can get on board, and you can say, we're gonna have these high expectations, but we're gonna keep it within this bucket, and it's manageable, and we're going to support you along the way. And so the evaluation thing, we call it educator growth. We want everybody to grow and everybody to improve.
Very good, thank you. Could I ask one other question, or maybe a bit of a statement? I just wanted to compliment you, the people who did send in the recommendations, and actually people who reached out to me. I was just absolutely thrilled with many of the people who are recommending you, and the very specific things that they spoke of.
Thank you. I've been very fortunate to work with some unbelievable people, so I've been very fortunate that way.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. A couple more questions I'd like to ask you, Dr. Vidala. First one, very specific question I always like to ask, because I'm hoping that in the very near future, we're going to be able to do some school building projects that I'm excited about, and hopefully we can get there. But can you talk about your experience with the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority? Have you been a part, or how intimately have you been a part of projects maybe at your school or at schools you've worked with? So you maybe speak to that.
Absolutely. So in the past 15 years or so, Revere's built 5 new schools. The most recent one was the Hill Elementary School, which had a pretty similar timeline to the Higgins Middle School project. So they were sort of in the same vein. We also did an accelerated repair program. We did the boilers and the roof at the Garfield Elementary School, and that tied up the end of my 2nd year in this position. So I really worked with the facilities manager a lot around that. We just entered an statement of interest for SOA, SOI. So a lot of acronyms here in education.
Yes.
But sometimes it's better just to say the words. We entered a statement of interest for one of our other elementary schools for windows and a boiler project as well. So we've done that. But the big one, and I think this is the one for Peabody as well, is we got into the core program for a new high school. And for us, that was huge. It took us 3 times. Sometimes you have to speak it into existence. So we kept talking about it, and I know that this is a drum that you've been banging for a while, but you have to do it. You have to talk it into existence. So we entered 3, denied, and then the 3rd time, we did get into the core program. And I was fortunate enough to be the central office representative for the first time ever last summer. They did a design summit with 3 school districts that were doing new high schools, and it was through MSBA with architects from the architect school at Northeastern. They flew in people from all over the country, and they worked with us about what the process would be like. It was incredible. I mean, if we had hours, I would sit and talk about it for a long time. But it was really eye-opening for me about the process, and their real thing is programs drive design. So if you really can articulate your programs, that will drive the design of your high school. So, for example, the high school wants to have a component about career and technical. That's going to help drive some of the design. But you have to articulate what your programs are going to be before you talk about your design. So you don't talk about the building layout, and so you talk about what experiences do you want kids to have? What do you want them to have beyond high school? And it was really, really an interesting process. And these were unbelievable architects that were doing the work pro bono, and we spent 3 full days with them, and it was great. And so I think that's something that we've given the MSBA feedback, that is something that everybody who goes through that process should enter in. It was an incredible experience.
Great, thank you. One other question I wanted to ask. Certainly, all of us are aware of the demands on a superintendent for a district, a large district like ours, 6,000. I know my job can be very challenging, demanding at times, but I often tell people, and I believe it, that the superintendent job is more difficult in many different ways. What do you do to kind of recharge and relax and get away? Because the job can be all-consuming, just like the mayor job, superintendent. What do you do to kind of get away and relax and find find some peace.
Absolutely. So I have 3 daughters, so. Right.
That's not giving you
So-
peace.
They're awesome. So, I mean, my wife and I like to go out to dinner, we like to spend time with the kids. I like to coach youth sports. I'm on the board for the Peabody girls lacrosse program. I'm trying to coach, as many teams as I can for the girls, working with the youth soccer kids, and we like to go to the beach. I grew up in Gloucester, so my kids would eat 3 meals on the beach. They'd stay there all day, which is great. And so some of those things, just spend time with friends. My one sort of outlet is running. I like to run, so you might see me on Linfield Street once in a while, chugging along. But I like to do that type of stuff and just have conversations with friends. And at the end of the night, I like to sit down with my wife on the couch and watch a show and have some conversation. So.
Great. Yeah, I used to say I used to get relaxation from my 3 daughters, and then they became 2 of them become teenagers, and there's no peace.
I don't envy you.
You'll be there soon enough. Thank you. I think we've learned a lot here. We've covered a lot of different areas that you've been able to answer, questions that we had for you. Other questions that you may have for us, or is there maybe a summary statement that you'd like to wrap up with as we conclude?
Sure. I really appreciate this process. I thought the questions were extremely thoughtful, and it seems like this is a very high-functioning board. And I just want to say, the more time I spend in Peabody, the more drawn I am to it. And I think that there are some areas for improvement. There are everywhere, and I think you need to have those high expectations. But I think that I've been in Revere for 15 of my 20 years, including the last 10. And I think the biggest thing that Peabody needs, twofold. One is a culture of high expectations, which I have for myself and I can bring to the district, and 2 is stability. And I think, I want to be here, and I want to be here for a long time. And I think I'm entrenched in the community, and, just in our interactions here, it seems like a great group of people to work with. And so, I'm here, I'm going to be here for a long time. And so, I wish you the best in your search, and I hope that this is something that we can have a conversation about, and maybe this works out for both of us.
Great. All right. Thank you, Dr. Videla. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a few-minute break.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to it. Sorry that we had a little bit of a delay. We just wanted to make sure that everything is going out on social media with PAT, and Facebook is streaming, and we just wanted to make sure we had that opportunity to make sure everything is running smoothly. So. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to now move forward to interview number 2 this evening. Again, I wanted to mention we were so pleased by the quality and the large number of candidates that we had for the superintendent position here in Peabody. Again, there were 33 applicants, very strong candidates, and we as a group wanted to learn more about 6 candidates, and we have another one here in front of us today that I think we were all impressed with his resume and wanted to learn a little bit more about him and meet him today. So, Dr. Omar, I wanted to welcome you. It's great to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned coming in, I'm going to ask you some questions to get things going, and we're going to go around, and all the school committee members will ask you questions as well. At the end, if you wanted to make a statement or ask us questions, we welcome that opportunity. So, again, great to have you here. Your resume is terrific, and I look forward to learning more about you.
Thanks.
All right, so first question I wanted to ask, I always like to ask, city finances, school budget question. You can maybe talk about your experience in working on school budgets, formulating a budget. What are things that you work towards? What are kind of the important things you look for in a school budget? Maybe you can walk us through that process that you've had in Everett.
Yes. All right, well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure for me to be here. In regards to the budget for school and or city, I have a really good understanding of school budget and city finance. And I gained this experience from when I was appointed to lead the task force in school finance about a year and a half ago. getting the actual city $300 million budget and working through it to see that the school had about $89 million in their budget, and going through it line by line, department by department, to understand what's actually happening in that budget. And in regards to walking through how you put that together, first, around January, the cherry sheet comes out, which kind of gives you an estimate as to what each city, for example, Everett, we normally get about $80 million for Chapter 70 funding, some charter school reimbursement, some veterans reimbursement, and it goes down to even library reimbursement. And once you get that document, then you kind of work together with your special ed, your ELL, and department heads, and each building principal. You put kind of a wish list together, kind of get an understanding of what they would need in each school, and then you kind of go from there to sit down with the mayor. And Mr. Mayor, you probably enjoy this a lot, because the school would come to City Hall and kind of basically have a conversation as to how much can the city afford above net school spending. And trying to have those conversations to get a good knowledge as to where you want to put things and where things will fall. And in more cases than none, it's very interesting because your special ed budget is such a vast part of your school budget. You kind of want to work with that separately in a sense, because your transportation piece is important. You need to make sure we know how many kids are going outside placement, and work around what supports you would need for one-to-one para in each classroom. So you kind of want to work diligently with the department head or the special ed director for that piece.
Great. Now, Everett, Peabody, we have about 6,000 students. Do you know the number in Everett about how many total students you have in district?
We have about 6,500 students.
Yeah, I thought we were very
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah, we're a pretty big school, just like you
yeah.
guys are, yeah.
Absolutely. Next question. Maybe you could talk about if you have a role with collective bargaining. Certainly, all cities and towns work with a number of unions to try to reach fair and balanced contracts. And just wanted to get a sense from you, your experience, your background in working with unions, maybe doing some collective bargaining. If you could maybe speak to that, please.
Yes. I've worked with Local 25 Teamsters, the fire union, police union, the clerical union, because I sit with the mayor and the mayor negotiation team and work diligently with all those unions over the years. And as you guys know, working with the Teamster as a union, they're not the easiest negotiators, but it was a very good experience for me going in there and meeting with those folks. And they were out of contract for about a year and a half, so it was a tough negotiation, and working hand in hand with the city and the mayor and walking through that was a really, really good experience for me. It was to the point where we had a clerical union, and in government, sometimes you have political hires, and there's some folks who are not as keen with what needs to happen in their roles. So I negotiated an evaluation document into the clerical union, and we bargained that. And once they agreed to that, which simply means that department heads in the building will be evaluating all of our clerks. And it's to the point where every year the clerk would get a raise on the day they were first hired without any sort of evaluation. And once I got that document into the contract with them, they agreed on that. The following weeks, I went out and got a professional development for all the clerks in the city, because I felt as though if we're going to hold them accountable for the things that they should be doing, we need to make sure we develop them properly. So just to say that when I work with unions, it's not to I got you a situation, it's to make sure each and every individual will be as productive as possible in their environments.
Great, that's good, thank you. So you've had a wide range of experience then working, you've been part of the negotiation team with a number of unions. Okay. All right, let's open it up. When we start, Mr. Amico, if we could start with you.
Easy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations, we've had 33 applicants, and you were one of the 6 that we've chosen to interview, so already congratulations.
Thank you,
Just
I appreciate it.
the person you are, the role model you are in Everett, because I do know quite a few people in Everett, and you do a lot of great work there, so
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for the youth there.
Thank
those who lead the buildings. It's a very important job. Sometimes I'm sure it's a very lonely job for them, and they need a lot of guidance and support. They're great educators, but they have huge responsibilities. They have teachers that they need to motivate and assist and mentor, and then obviously the most important people in the building, the students, that they have to look after. So I guess my question is, with your experience in Everett and over at Penn State, your leadership abilities, how would you help manage principals, support principals, and mentor principals, whether they are new principals or experienced?
Okay. So, being a vice principal myself for years, and now obviously moving on to some different roles, the principal of the building are always, to me, the instructional leader. So, for me to manage them and making sure that they're carrying out all the responsibilities that needs to be done in the building, I would first always have a meeting with my administrators. Just basically going to talk to them about what they see, what's their plan, what's their vision for each of their buildings. Because obviously I would also have some sort of plan as to what I want to see get done in each building. And I always think that you can't really hold someone accountable for things you never really give them a chance to learn. So I would probably do something like a workplace inventory assessment of all of my administrators, and just to see where they are, see how they function, see how they operate in the buildings, and see how they can work with others. And by doing that, then I could actually have a one-on-one meeting with those individuals and just talk through the domains in which the assessment shows me. Because to me, I want to be as strong a support, and I will be as strong a support for all the principals, because I know it's a tough place to be. And for us, we're in a building of 2,000 plus students, and myself and the principal, then for me, I'm simply a principal inside of a principal building, because I operate and kind of run all those academies. And having to make quick, concise decisions all the time, and can't second guess yourself, is really, really a task in itself.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Turn it over to you, Mr. Arnottis.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Dr. Easy. We appreciate having you. Thank you. I just was curious if you could talk about your leadership style, your management style, how you operate in that sense, and if you faced a difficult challenge in any time during your career that you could use an example of showing your leadership.
Yeah. My leadership and management style, open and honest conversation. I always lead with that, and I always want to make sure I'm communicating to each and every one of my administrators or subordinates, if you may. I'm very decisive, I'm very consistent, and I'm very fair in whatever I decide. I'm never afraid to make the tough decisions. To me, being a principal or a superintendent, you're not really in the business to make friends. You're in the business to educate young people and get them to the level in which they can succeed in college or career. So if it comes down to making a decision, it's always going to be the best interest of the students. And if I'm becoming a superintendent here, a D superintendent here, if a principal do not have the best interests of my students, the students, then there's no place for that person in this system.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Easy. I appreciate you coming out tonight
Thank you.
with everything we have going on. I'd like to know why you've applied to Peabody. What do you know about us? What intrigues you? What would you like to change? All of those type of things.
That's a really good question. So I applied here to be superintendent because, one, I know this city very well. I competed against the city basketball and football.
You said competed?
Competed.
Yeah, very nice way to put it.
How did that go? No, keep going, sorry.
It was fun. I enjoyed it, and but I live 8 minutes down the street from here. My brother lived on Clement Ave in Peabody, and to me, Peabody is in North Everett, there's so many families that left Everett and moved into Peabody.
Yes.
Already, I'm very familiar with Peabody as a district. My wife and I shop at Trader Joe's on 114. To that matter, we pay a light bill at Peabody Light and Power. So I might not live in the city, but I feel like I'm part of the community. I really do. And I look at the demographic and how over the years the greater Boston schools are changing, and education and teaching have to evolve because we're getting different students from different walk of life. And I think being in the old-fashioned, so to speak, or comprehensive high school, it's not necessarily working so much anymore. We need to be more innovative and creative as to how we teach or educate our students. And being around people and seeing the buildings. For example, this is an amazing building. So credit to you guys, honest to God, that this building is immaculate. And as I walk in this building, I'm visualizing where I could have a STEM academy as a pathway or a health academy. I'm literally looking for this, oh, this is, and it's amazing. So I'm getting kind of excited about, and hats off to you guys because this is an amazing building. But I walk around, I've been around, I drove around, and there's some of the buildings that are older. I think of, like, for example, the Welsh School, and, it needs some tender care and some love. And I think my experience that I bring to the table is sitting down and representing the mayor of the city of Everett with the MSBA and knowing what to talk about, how to talk about what we need, and how, because Peabody, obviously, this is a very, it's an affluent community, but yet we do have high-need students. And we need to be able to employ that to the state so we can get more funding. I even looked at our cherry sheets for Peabody, and we're getting $31 million. And I look at Everett, and we're getting $81 million. I'm like, well, we have some of the similar kids. They may not all look the same, but when they perform and what they need, we're doing the same work, and we need to get similar funding. We need to get some more money to help us move our students to the next level. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. I appreciate the knowledge that you just expressed to me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Huckman, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Easy, for being here tonight. And,
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman, for having me.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for your career, both in city government and your prior career, but I do want to inform you that you're not even the most accomplished athlete in this room tonight. Mayor Betancourt, 1994 Massachusetts Boys High School Player of the Year.
Oh, it's not even close.
Yes.
I would defer to that.
Thank you. Well, that's not even close.
And I knew that there were a lot of families in Peabody who have roots from Everett. I didn't realize how many until you became a finalist in this search. And I think every single one of them have reached out to me by phone or text or in some
I'm telling
capacity.
you, yeah.
Yes.
I feel like I'm a part of this community already, honestly.
And I'm glad we're keeping it light a little bit, so, but a little more substantively now.
Okay.
I do have a couple of questions for you. Maybe you can fold your response to both questions into one, or if you want to take them separately. I don't know what your, I don't understand what your role currently is as Executive Vice Principal for Academics in Academies, of Everett is. That's one thing. And then, so if you can give me a little insight on that and what your, day-to-day operation is, what your, maybe goals are, what your, on an annual basis or semi-annual basis. And then two is, in the information sheet that you gave us tonight, which I appreciate because it does give us some additional information.
Yeah.
Your first point is that you moved Everett from a level 3 to a level 2 school in terms of accountability. If you can tell us how you accomplished that, or how you and the people that you led accomplished that, I should say.
Okay. All right, so I'll take the latter first. So when I took over Everett High School with the principal, that school was performing in 9th percentile and was a level 3, really should have been a level 4 based on the percentage. And, but the school looked great. The walls, everything was immaculate. Honest to goodness, it was amazing. And being from Everett and this school on the hill that just captures the entire city. But it wasn't performing. The school wasn't performing. And the first thing we did, we formed a data team. So we meet once a week. And it's to look at data, bring all of the MCAS scores, bring all of the teaching that's happening in the classrooms, and put them up on the board and have folks present data, look at it, break it down to see where our students are struggling. And I can tell you, our kids were not doing well in ORQs. They didn't know how to read between the lines and break down the questions. And when we look back at the data, you can see they just don't even answer the questions. They leave it blank. And as educators, you know, once you're doing those tests, if you put Y, Z, X, anything on the paper, you get a point for it. But when they leave it blank, it's absolutely nothing. It doesn't really help. So getting that information and talking to the students and disseminating that information to them was a huge, huge benefit to all of our students. Then we start looking at the suspension. They were giving students 10-day suspension like it was candy. They were just giving them out. And if the kids outside of school, it's obvious that they won't learn. They can't actually get the material to do the testing if they're not in school. So now we have to come up with creative ways of keeping the kids in school. So now, instead of having internal suspension, we have an AAE room. So alternative education environment, AEE room, right? That gives a chance to, if a kid is misbehaving in the classroom, and we're taking them out of the instruction, we put them in that room with a teacher to actually continue the instruction. So they won't be in the running around, going to the halls, the bathroom without being monitored. They're in suspension, but they're still following up with their work. So we created that rule, get that done. Then we decided that we have thousands of letters write up and discipline on students, but we have nothing on teachers. So teachers were not being held accountable, but we're holding students accountable. So we decided we worked with a team of our department heads. We had a consultant that came in with us to work with us from DESE because we were getting a lot of resources. So let me just go back and say, it's an interesting thing when your school is requiring assistance, because it's a time when DESE gives you so much support and professional development that would save you guys money, right? But no one wants the school to be in a position where it needs to get, assistance. So it's an interesting thing. So we had so much paid in PD coming in, folks coming in with UDL and UBD and just working with us. And we created a document, the Rights and Responsibility through Restorative Justice in PBIS. And that document became a model. We posted all over the school. The teachers have it in the room. We refer to it all the time. So the student had the right to a fair and equitable education. They had the right to be respectful and to be respected. So it's a back and forth both ways for each student. And we realized that our suspension went down significantly. Kids were buying to school. They were coming to school more. Attendance was better. And before you know it, teachers and students are having a better relationship in the hallways, not just, hey, where you go, where's your pass? Go see your dean. It was more of a, how can I help? Where you go? What's happening? There's more conversation and less explosion in the building. Now, in regards to my current role, it's an interesting role because the title is from here to there. It's so big, right? And it changes daily. It's currently the Executive Vice Principal of Academies of Everett. And it encompasses business, innovation, and community engagement. So what does that mean? And I have some documents here I could give to you guys later. It's going to explain what's happening. Every business partner in our city and around the surrounding city, I engage with them to build a partnership with them. And it goes from $25,000, $50,000, or $100,000 in in-kind donation. And that means in internship, in externships, job shadowing. So I'm getting our kids out to get a real life, authentic education. which is buying them, bringing back into school and be able to experience something before they go out to college. My job means I also responsible for 6, 7 lead teachers and all of our assistant principal. So we have 4 upper academies and 1 freshman experience academy. The freshman academy has 2 guidance counselors and 2 lead teachers. And the rest of academies has an AP and a lead teacher and 2 counselors. That affords us with a wraparound service for all of our students. So we're broken the school down in basically 5 schools within a school. So it's a smaller learning communities. We have the hands on all the students. We're working on their attendance, and we're making sure this is equitable and accessible program for all of our kids. And it's changing their lives. I mean, I could talk about this for all night. I literally could do this. I mean, right now, I have 20 students in my health academy. When they walk, if we have graduation, when the school year ends, June 4th, they will leave that building and they'll be certified EMT. And I went out to one of the local ambulance services and partner with them, talking into what we need to get done. Someone comes in and teach our kids how to be an EMT, and they will take the test, or sit the test at the end of the year, and they will walk out of that building, and they'll go right into civil service testing, because now everybody's trying to do a model where the fire department will have its own ambulance. They would employ half of our kids. So right off the bat, our kids will be going right into jobs. And that's kind of what my role is in that building. I mean, it has broadened because my experience stretches from that into disciplining kids and running the building. So everything comes through me. I'm dealing with 10 different things. I feel like I'm the executive director of the business academy, the principal, and the vice principal. And if I ever get to the point where you guys come to my school for a site visit, you can ask anyone in that building. They'll tell you, Dr. Easy does this, this, and this. His title is endless. And this is because for me, every kid deserves a chance, because someone gave me a chance before when I was a young man, and it has brought me to where I am right now. So I believe every kid deserves a chance, and they can make it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Olympio?
Dr. Izzi, thank you for coming tonight. This is a special education question. Can you just explain a little bit your background and maybe implementing some special education programs throughout your career?
Okay, it's a good question and a very interesting one, because I am certified director of special education. So I absolutely understand what it takes to make sure those kids get all the resources that they need. To me, they're just as important as any other kid in the building. So my first year, I actually, as a vice principal in every high school, I serve as the department head for special education. So I believe that there are different models out there as to how to service them the best way. And I believe you guys have a full inclusion model here. We have inclusion at the high school. We also have co-teach. So I don't think you guys have co-teach here, but I think that would be an idea in the future if I get the chance to do that. But the co-teach model is interesting because people just see co-teaching as a general head teacher and a special ed support teacher, and the general ed teacher is teaching the entire lesson, and the co-teacher is just kind of walking around. And that is not how that should work. Both teachers should be planning together ahead of time, and the lessons should be cohesive between the two. So sometimes you walk into a classroom, and you should never be able to tell the difference between a co-teacher and, the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher, because they should be planning together and working together. We created the connection program at my school, Everett High School. You guys also have a program here called Connection Program and Access Program here. And we use ours for some social emotional needs and for some of our special ed students, because we have a therapeutic day school in our city, and the high school and the connection program kind of is the bridge between that. So if a student don't need to go to that day school, they would be in the connection program. We staff it with a dean, a BCBA, a guidance counselor, and a social worker. And we only have like 45 students in the program. but they get the best treatment because they have all these access and all resources wrapped around them. So, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lupia. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Dr. Easy.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn.
I have a question, if I can find it here. This is regarding one of the statements made by one of your letters of recommendation from Dr. Malone.
Okay.
And he's a tough guy to please, so,
He's a tough guy. And
yes, yes.
And he's very short, but he's tough.
In your letter, in his letter, he spoke of your work leading to the development of student success pathways that have become a model of emulation for schools across Massachusetts. And I would like to hear about that, but I'm also mindful you may have spoken of those already in response to the other questions, but please, if you can tell me what he's addressing, I'd love to hear it, and if we have time, I'll ask another question. That's
Absolutely.
fine.
Okay, I don't want to end this up, but I want to give you this document that I have here brought to kind of explain some more about the model. So, the academy model, I just got back, but not just got back, but a couple weeks ago from Dallas. And I brought one of our at-large school board member, our director of curriculum, and 3 of our assistant principal. We visited a school in Texas, Peabody, and it's such a model school, and it's such a unique school. I want to do some things with this model that this region or state I've never seen, because I believe that it could work. I believe it's going to help our population here in Peabody, and it's helping the ones in Everett. 1, it would re-engage our students. And 2, it would treat them like adults and get them prepared for college and career. The school in Peabody, Texas, they don't have a bell. There is no bell that rings for me, you, or anyone in this room to get up and go to the next classroom. The students know when to leave the room and go to the next assigned class. And it's amazing. So I've seen this school twice now. The first time I went there, they had in their dentistry pathway an automage table. I'm not too sure if you guys are familiar with this. And now this is a table about 6 feet long, and it has 4 cadavers in it. And it's a computerized thing. When you open it up, and you could see every single piece of the body in motion. And the students they could dissect the body, the brain, the head, every single part of it. I went back to my superintendent, Mrs. Garthy at the time, and I said, I need this table for my health science pathway. I need this table, it's cost this much, this is what we need, and without a question, she was so supportive. She said, yeah, let's work on it, let's get it done. Got it procured, and we have that table. Every high school is one of the only high school in the state that has this table right now. And I tell you, if I'm the superintendent here, this school will have that table, because Harvard University and MGH uses that table. And our students will leave here and be well prepared to go right into a surgical room, and they could cut a body up and know exactly where everything is, because that table tells them everything about it. The academy model is amazing. You get these students really engaged in school. And I don't want to talk so much about the academy as it relates to high school, because right now I'm working on a grant to put the pathways into middle school. So, and the grant will provide about $100,000 a year. And the goal is to slowly get it down to the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Because if I can do that, by the time they get to the 9th grade, they're ready to go. And it gives them more time and learning from that point on. It's an amazing program, and I think every school should have it. I think every district should look into doing it, because once you get this program going, the key thing about this is, innovative pathways, I've secured over $400,000 in grants. We just signed off on the capital scale grant for $205,000. And of course, I looked in the list of districts that got that grant, and Peabody wasn't one of those districts. And I'm saying to myself, okay, well, we got to figure something out, because we do know we need some more funding. And that's an avenue to get more funding. And we should be applying to the Capital Skill Grant, and we should have a STEM Academy, we should have a business law, as we talk. We should have these things because it helps us get more money to service our students, okay? So now we have the opportunity, Student Opportunity Act coming out, right? That's another way of getting some funding, and this could be a way for us to kind of introduce some of the pathways that we have going on. It's a program that really shows students how much we care about them. It has reignite a common planning time where we have curriculum intervention twice a week. One day you have intervention for each of our students. What that means, we pick John Brown to come in the meeting with all of the teachers and talk about what we see that's been an hindrance. Why are you not performing in Mrs. Brown's class, but in Mr. Barrett's class you are doing excellent? What's happening? It's going to talk about what's going on. And this is all of our teachers per academy. So not only is it benefiting the student, it's also benefiting the teachers. I don't think, did I answer all your questions? I think there's not a part to this.
No, you did. That was good.
Okay.
That was good.
I do want to say, as we talk about the intervention piece, a new piece of our curriculum we're trying to implement in the school right now is MTSS, which is multi-tier system support. And this is from K to 12. And I don't know if you guys have that here, but this is something that would intervene with education from an early year, from K02, just to see where students are falling short and how we could support them. Where should we put the funds? Because as we work through the Student Opportunity Act, it's important for us to understand where we're going to put the money. Where is it going to go? Which department, which area? Is it special ed? Is it ELL? You know, what kind of resources are we're going to put in place? Are we going to have or need a parent liaison that could reach out to students who are not coming to school? Because, and I don't want to speak specifically about different buildings, but some of our students come to school here in Peabody. But when you look at the data, they're not all graduating, okay? So something is happening where we need to take a look at what's happening. How do we tie it together? You have so many great programs here, You have 5 or 6 CTE programs. And I think those are amazing. Those are absolutely amazing because we need the hands-on education, right? But what is it that's preventing our students from graduating? Why are they dropping out by the time they get to 10th grade? What's going on? So those are things that, and I mean, again, I could talk about this all night because I love this. It's a passion for me, and someone helped me when I was in high school, and I want to be that person to help the next student.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Dr. Easy, that was a very interesting answer. I actually enjoyed that. And you can see the passion that you bring on that. That was pretty interesting. I do have one additional question I wanted to ask you, and this handout is terrific. Thank you for this.
Okay.
But I did see, and you had mentioned in an earlier answer that you're the city representative at the Massachusetts School Building meetings, at the MSBA meetings. And that's something that I'm very interested in, and we're hoping from future projects, and we're doing some things now. Can you maybe talk about what that role means, and how have you been a part of, I know Everett High School, a new project. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your experiences in some of those building projects.
Okay. That was interesting to me because I do love buildings. My wife makes fun of me all the time. I would see buildings, oh my God, it's a beautiful house, but it's something about buildings that just, triggers good vibes for me, right? So when the first meeting we had, when the school came together with the city, because there was a interest that was put in for an elementary school in Everett. Our community is growing, and it's been growing for a while. And MSBA received that and accept that as Everett Public School putting in for a 6 elementary school. Okay. Now, when we all came together to talk about how we can be on the same page before we go to the MSBA. So the talks were going on. I'm sitting in the meeting, I'm observing what's going on. And I said to the room, I said, I get that our numbers are moving and it's always changing. but we don't have a middle school in Everett. And there's something to be said about the middle school. It's very important. So I said, well, if we build a school that could host the 7th, 8th grade, and maybe the 9th grade students, take those 1,000 students, maybe 500 each, 7th and 8th, out of all of our neighborhood schools, and put them in one building along with the 9th graders. And we had a space across the street from the high school, which we would have put a catwalk from the high school to that school. That means once the building is connected, now you can have the 7th and 8th grade students participate in our STEM, our SEED program, all of it, our athletics, and the room seemed as if, you know, a divine intervention happened because they didn't really thought about that before. And they proposed that to the MSBA and retract building the elementary school, and they accept that as an option because that would relieve the pressure from all of the other neighborhood schools, taking them all, the 8th graders, 7th graders out of the school and give more space, as opposed to building another elementary school. Everett is only 2 square miles. It's not as big as Peabody. There's no really room to build another school. But obviously you guys have a lot of space here, and if that's what the plan is to build a new school or whatever it is, I'll be on pins and needles waiting to have those conversations to see how we could whether build a new school or renovate a new school, something that, you know, would give us a nice, because when the kids come to school and see how beautiful the building is, it does something for them,
Yep.
and they want to keep it up.
Yep. Thank you, excellent. So we've learned a lot. You've had some excellent answers. Wanted to maybe now give you the opportunity, if you had questions for us, or maybe if you wanted to kind of summarize with a final statement as we wrap up, I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Well, I do have questions, but I do want to, you know, give a statement because I feel honored to be here. It's an excellent opportunity, and this district has so many great things and could do even greater things. I feel as though my experience, I have a very unique set of experiences, and I think being involved and having the knowledge from the municipal side and my current role right now, which is basically a district-wide role. And it's interesting because my title doesn't seem fit for what I do. And I don't necessarily get wrapped up in titles because it's to me, I could just be called the guy that does whatever it is that help kids. And that's fine with me as long as I'm getting somewhere and helping those students. My heart goes out to the city, this town. There's been a lot of lost, and I think of our superintendent, the former superintendent, and I live so close, it felt so close to me, and you guys, the community has been so strong in really rallying around each other and supporting the students and the staff, and I think that's something that can't go without notice. And if I become the superintendent here, my goal would be to continue the great work that she was doing. And I know she was trying to do some things with flipping the start time for school, which I think is very important. And that's probably another conversation for another day, but there's some great things she was doing, and I really would love to honor and carry those on. I think of Elia O'Donnell that passed away a couple of years ago. I believe she was attending the Brown School. And there was just so much in the assistant principal, I think, that passed away from the high school. And this city is continuing to move forward. And with your superintendent sudden that I know this community and this committee is probably ready to make a move and hiring someone that's a plug and play into carrying on the vision and the drive and the tradition of this school district. And I really believe that I am that person. I feel like I have the knowledge, the experience, the motivation, the innovative style, and a fresh set of eyes to look at what's going on, to be the person that take this district to the next level. And I'm really, really appreciative for your time. I know this is not easy. I mean, my last name is easy, but this is not easy for you guys. And I can see how many, I mean, the hours you guys put into this, to scour through all those resumes and get it down to the top 7 or 6. But I'm so appreciative just to be here and to have a conversation with you fine people. It's amazing. And I really, really look forward to having a good chance of being a superintendent here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take a few-minute break? Sure.
Yes.
All right, so I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Re-interviewing a third candidate this evening, and very glad to have Dr. Chris Lord with us today. Obviously, somebody who we know very well. We had 33 applicants for the job. We narrowed it down to 6, and certainly wanted to have you in and speak to you in this capacity.
Thank you.
Before we begin, I just want to thank you really on behalf of all of us in the city for everything that you've meant to the city over particularly the last few months, Dr. Lord. You've really stepped up in so many ways. And
Happy to be useful to good people.
well, thank you. No, but you, a big heart. You really stepped up for when we needed some leadership and some, just some assistance in many levels. So thank you for that.
Sure.
We're going to ask you some questions today to get to know a little bit more about you. At the end, I want to certainly give you the opportunity if you wanted to close with a statement or ask us any questions. I want to give you that opportunity. But I figured I can start things off. Just want to ask a question in terms of your experience with city budgets and school budgets in particular, and talk about, as superintendent, how would you go about putting together that budget and some of your experiences in the past in working on budgets?
Okay. It's a good question. I think my most recent experience with managing school budgets is one with which all of you are pretty familiar. The budget process that I worked through here was not unlike some of the ones that I've had in the past. I was a principal of 3 high schools, and the process of bringing people together, finding out the priorities of interests, and finding out the needs within the building. We make those decisions based on enrollment data and needs of students and so forth. So the process was very similar here. I feel very comfortable going through that process here. I know it was a challenging year last year with respect to the budget, but the elements that I learned through that time frame helped me prepare to be a superintendent. I feel pretty confident being able to take the city through another process through this again. We have some wonderful people that you already know that are part of our budget team. I think last year we had a really excellent business administrator who gave us some really good details on how every dollar is being spent throughout the city for every building. We intend to take that to scale with the coming year with budget books. You may have seen these in some of the neighboring communities. It seems to be a good way to go. And, I'm hoping to be an integral part of that process in whatever capacity. So I feel pretty capable of managing a budget, and, I'm not going to be, I have a little bit to learn about it. I don't have as experience as some of the other candidates, but I do have a good sense of how our community works and how our community would build a budget together. And that's how I've done it in the past, and that's how I would do it here again.
Great, thank you. And also wanted to ask, I know you've been a part of negotiations with our numerous unions in the city, and just wanted to talk about collective bargaining as superintendent, how you would go about working with the unions to put together fair and balanced agreements.
I think that starts with the relationships that you establish between all constituents involved in building a contract. My first exposure to that was when I was a teacher on the West Coast. I went through the teaching faculty, and we brought elements of interest to the bargaining table from the teacher perspective. That was my first exposure to it. I've been involved in a variety of different contract issues in the positions that I've had before. 2 work-to-rule situations, some very difficult, challenging situations. I have some pretty good idea of how not to do it, and I'm very happy to be in a community that does know how to do it. My discussions with Kara after your union contracts were resolved when I first started helped me see how this community works together to get an appropriate balance between the needs of our constituents to serve our students appropriately, and at the same time work within the constraints of a budget that we all have to live with. Again, I feel confident about being able to help this community through a contract process. We're going to be starting that again in the fall, and I would build on the current experience that I have with the relationships that we already have, and I think you have a pretty good process already in place, and I would just work to continue to make that happen.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to open it up, and we'll start with Mr. Amico.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to Dr. Lord, thank you for being here. You have a great resume, and I was fortunate enough to be on the search committee when you applied
Oh,
as
really?
assistant superintendent 18 months ago. And I was in the interview with you,
remember.
along with Kara, and I was impressed then, and I'm impressed now. And I just thank you for your leadership. I thank you for your kind heart and your calming way about you. It's infectious. And
Thank you.
thank you for what you've done for our community.
Happy to help.
So I just wanted to say that publicly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll give you a question in regards to principals.
Sure.
The most important person, other than students in a building, is a principal. It's the leader. But the leader is sometimes a lonely position, needs a lot of supports, needs a lot of mentoring. How would your skill set presently, if it were to evolve into a superintendency, how would you see yourself mentoring and supporting and guiding principals in our district?
Oh, I think that I had some great experiences as a coach, working as a coach and working with students, and then working as a mentor teacher when I was in California, and then coming to the East Coast. And I find myself, I never stop being a teacher. I really like teaching, and I have a variety of skills that I try to emulate myself in every setting that I've been in, and I'm happy to help people get to be a better spot. It really depends on the individual, and I try to get to know the individual one at a time, like I got to know my students individually, and try to figure out exactly where they are in their life journey and take them to the next level if they have an interest. Have a variety of quills in the quiver that aren't just me, but are part of a team that I typically work with that can support a principal or support anybody that needs to get to a better place. I feel fortunate to be able to have all those resources at my fingertips, and this has been a wonderful community for that kind of example. I think the principals that we already have here are really top shelf people, and they're doing some wonderful things in our schools. I mean, the internet speaks for itself, what they've done just in the last 3 days, getting enrichment activities out to the students, accelerating student learning despite the fact that they aren't in the classroom, leading through what has got to be a generational event for all of us, and still being able to move the learning agenda forward. Very impressive. So part of it is finding out where people are and helping them get to the next place, and the other part of it is letting them go. I mean, we have some great people here, and I have great confidence in their ability to continue to accelerate learning for our kids.
Great, thank you,
Just a
sir.
balance. Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mr. Arnottis?
Thank you. Dr. Lord, great to have you here. Thank you for being here. I see
to be
you
here.
have your Peabody Strong pin on.
Absolutely.
That certainly
Every
doesn't
day.
go unnoticed. Thank you for all you've done for us over the past few months. Truly, it is incredibly appreciated.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your short-term vision, your long-term vision, and what do you see as your first few months if you were to be superintendent, your long-term goal a few years out, and then anything, having been here now, seeing us, what are the big things you want to have done?
Oh,
If you could name a few, I know.
This is a great question, Andrew, and the reason I say that is because this city, and I've said this before, I'm not sure if everybody is aware of the unique position that Peabody is in right now in its educational history. Being on the NEAC Commission, I'm privileged to be able to work with a team of people that accredits 130 high schools, and there's 5 other teams, so we're dealing with all 660 high schools in New England, and they do so on a set of standards that are really difficult to achieve. If you're meeting all those standards as a high school, you're doing real well. I've since come to learn about the accreditation process through kindergarten through 8th grade, and I would love for our city to be among the first in Massachusetts to become fully accredited. So that's part of my vision, for us to take a look at what the standards are with respect to accreditation. K-12, district accreditation, there's only two other districts that are looking at that in the state of Massachusetts, and I'd like to say more about that. And it starts with the vision of the graduate, which we've talked about before. The vision of the graduate has 7 elements of it that Kara saw a year ago as, wow, this isn't just about high school, this is about life. Those 7 elements of the vision of the graduate, if we can get kids walking across the stage with that type of skill set, being a problem solver and a self-manager and a global thinker, an effective communicator, all 7 of those elements, if they can really get a good sense of what that is, they're going to be in great shape. Now, what's so special about this community is they're taking not only those 7 elements, but the teachers at the high school, and, you know, and to certain degrees at K-8, because that's our #1 goal for the year this year, is to showcase elements of student work that are connected to the vision of the graduate. There's people at the high school for the last couple of years, they have rubrics that really define very carefully what it would mean to be an artist innovator, for example. And they're assessing that in the classroom. So the kids are getting a really good sense in their math class, their science class, their social studies class about what it means to be an artist innovator in that class. Activities are happening in the classroom, and it's showing up on your report cards. The parents are seeing the degree of proficiency with which the students are reaching these 7 elements in all their classes in the high school. That's pretty unique in New England, and I think that is an incredible springboard for a vision. Kara saw that. She and I talked about it all the time, and we would love to get every kid in the city to really own those 7 elements. Yeah, they can have a great GPA. Yeah, they can do the AP stuff and do all the things that the superculture is really expecting. But those skill sets that are walking across the stage, I think one of you, I think John, you mentioned that at one of our meetings when we talked about the vision of the graduate. You know, you don't test that stuff in high school. Well, yeah, you do at our high school. I mean, it's hard for me to convey the value of that. The entire accreditation process, K-12, is based on those skill sets and kids walking across the stage with them. So, to answer your question, I would love to be one of the first districts to be fully accredited, and if we can start with the vision of the graduate, which is already deeply into our culture, and I think I shared with everybody here, we'll share it online. We actually presented, our team went to the NEAC commission, and these are like 50 people that are principals and superintendents all over New England, and we presented our vision of the graduate to them. And the last thing I'll share with you, I'm very proud of the high school students. I shared it with them last week. The first quarter grades came out with respect to their proficiency on those 7 elements. The second quarter came out with those second quarter elements, and every one of those have gone up for the student body. From first quarter to second quarter, the students are improving their performance on those 7 elements. I'm delighted. If they get good grades, I'm even happier that they're executing in a real way those 7 elements of the vision of the graduate. I hope that answers your question about that. That's the vision. And you are unique in the city, and I'm so delighted to be a part of it. It's
Thank
good.
you.
Yep.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lord, for coming tonight. I do appreciate it.
Sure.
I kind of struggled with what I was going to ask you because I've worked with you on so many projects and have been around you so much that I think I know you pretty well. Something that you've been pulling double, triple duty for us. You've kind of been here, there, and everywhere. You've spent a lot of time at the high school now, so I know you're very well versed there, and you're helping. Your leadership there is tremendous. My question to you is, as superintendent, how would that leadership look to our elementary schools? What type of things would you be thinking about for them? Because I already know you're very familiar with the high school. It's the elementary schools that I'm kind of wondering where your leadership would go there.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I thought a lot about that myself. I've been part of a remarkable team of people around me. Kara was all elementary, so I learned a tremendous amount from her. Dr. Kerbel, same thing. He's been very strong with elementary programming. And then after that, I've been a part of the elementary principals meetings just very recently, and I've come to really respect the elementary principals and what they need, and then to have kind of magically some of these programs get established. I mean, getting picked by UConn to have, 10 or 15 coaches come into our elementary schools, and then we're getting a Math in Focus program up and going. So anyway, my role as a superintendent will be to support that. I mean, I have to trust that team because they know those kids, they know what they need, and everything I can do to have their back and to get the things rolling, that would be how I would do it. I mean, I know my strengths, I know my limits. I mean, this is my 4th high school principalship, it's not my first rodeo. At the same time, I've learned an awful lot about elementary programming in the last year and a half, particularly from the 2 leaders with whom I've worked, and also with the elementary team. And I would do everything I can to support them and trust them to make those judgments. That's where and I'm learning something every day. I don't know, maybe you saw the Brown Schools Padlet that they put out there it's really incredible. It's a great way for kids K-5 to learn and to have a one-stop shop for parents to look at. So folks, if you're watching, go take a look at Padlet from the Brown.
There are thousands of watching.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, there's so much out there on the internet right now, and of course, it's exploding with everybody staying home to do learning. And I think our elementary leaders have really done a remarkable job of focusing that understanding to some really quality enrichment activities for the kids. And I just got to trust that judgment to accelerate it in its own, and I will support it.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Turn it to you, Mr. Huckman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Dr. Lord. Your comfort and your personality and your enthusiasm is so clear tonight and so vibrant, and that's who you are, you know, and you've, every step of the way since you've come to our district has been so impressive. You've met challenges that no one could have envisioned when you first started here, and each time you've met a challenge that seems insurmountable, not only have you come through it, but you've come through it teaching us different ways and different things to see in terms of how you can improve upon things. And
You're doing a lot for a fragile male ego, I got to tell you. Thank you.
No, I have a
That's the nicest thing I've ever heard you say.
Well, he did compliment you earlier.
I did, yeah.
I have, you know, I'll come right out and say it. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you.
Thank you.
You've been phenomenal in our district. I didn't have the pleasure of interviewing you, or I wasn't on the search committee as Mr. Miko was, but they certainly did a fine job.
Thanks, I was really fortunate to be here. I don't know if you're spiritual people, but sometimes things just click.
Yeah.
I've used this analogy before. Sometimes you drive to work and all the lights are green.
Yeah.
Every time I come to Peabody, the lights are green. It's really great.
I think, you know, fortunately and through unfortunate circumstances, I've gotten to know you fairly well on a personal level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, perhaps at times. And nothing but impressive each step of the way.
Thanks.
So, like Ms. Carpenter, and I was challenged with, you know, a question, or where do I engage you in this interview. So I think I know you, but I don't know that I really do. So maybe, why don't you, if you could please express to us what's your single greatest professional accomplishment, and then your single greatest personal accomplishment.
Wow. Let's see, my greatest professional accomplishment. Huh.
It's always good when you have to think.
Yeah, that's a good
Thinking about
question.
so many.
Events like that often have a component of elasticity. And I think my greatest professional accomplishment so far was being runner-up for Principal of the Year in Rhode Island. That was pretty cool. My parents nominated me for that, and that was really neat. They came and did the interviews. The guy that beat me out was really cool, but just to be considered to be that degree of professionalism, the odd dichotomy to that was, you probably read about me in the newspaper, the state came in and said, no, you're out of a job. So, I mean, it was one of those things that really test your elasticity. I think it really helped me grow as a professional. But I just went down to a party, the head custodian who's been there for 30 years, who was there when I was principal, he retired like about a month ago, and we went down, had a nice little event down there, and got to meet all those people again, and it was just some positive energy, and the school has transformed itself, which has been great for them, and I'm happy for them. But anyway, my greatest professional accomplishment were probably doing that, but I'm hoping there's some others ahead that I can share with other people, because that was definitely a team effort. There was a lot of people involved with that. My greatest personal accomplishment, that's a good one. I would gotta say my 2 children. My boys are blowing me away. I mean, my son Christopher just graduated from UNH. He is a salesman, and he is ripping it up. He has teched out our living room, and he's continuing his job at home. And I'm amazed. He has 3 screens going, and I just can't keep up with him. He's really amazing. My son George is an artist, but he's a very smart artist, and he he made his own record album, and he just surprised my wife and I with this when we were coming back from Penn State the other day. So I'm curious to see his album. He plays the guitar, and he picked it up himself while he was at Penn State, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I think that's my boys, my personal accomplishment. Is that what you're looking for? Yeah.
I'm not looking for anything.
Oh.
Your response.
Yeah, there's my personal and professional accomplishments, and I'm hoping there'll be some others ahead for all of us.
Sure. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Olympio?
Dr. Laura, thank you for being here, and really thank you for being a strength of comfort and strength really for a while now in this district, and I echo the same sentiments as pretty much everybody in this room.
Thanks.
My question to you is, this has been a question that pops up at my Special Education Parent Advisory Board a lot, and a lot of special education parents have a concern with when their children are leaving elementary school, transition into the Higgins, and then from the Higgins to the high school. Do you have any thoughts on programs or anything that you can do to help with that transition? Because it really does, I hate to say it, but frighten some parents about the children leaving, the great elementary schools in our district to go to these larger schools, and hopefully, they can stay in district, these students.
Yeah. So let's start at the high school because we're right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
We have been fortunate to be able to get the program of studies approved for our high school, to get that information out to the families, and to get the student requests for next year in place. So we have a very clear picture of every ninth grader coming up to the high school next year. To help those kids out, we have a transition plan in place. I asked Todd if he could identify 100 of the most needy students at the Higgins right now in the 8th grade. Who do we really need to get our arms around? I've done this before at high schools where we can break little clusters and make clusters at the high school. You had something called small learning communities in the past here, and that was for the entire 9th grade. We can do that, but this seemed like a little bit more appropriate way to go. Many of the students that you're talking about are students with special needs. So as we're building next year's master schedule, we're going to have them in smaller classes with 4 teachers, English, Math, Science, Social Studies teacher, that all have a common planning period, just like they do here at the middle school, and they'll be able to sit down and really get to know those 30 kids, really get their arms around them, and hopefully they'll have that safety component. So 4 of their classes will be part of this little mini cluster, and the other 3 will be like a typical high school setting. They'll get into the settings where they would want to go. We're hoping that that kind of environment will provide that kind of safety transition, 9 to 10. And the other thing which I found very effective in the past is to have step-up days and move-up days for the students. As of right now, I think our last day of school, I'm getting a little confused myself, is that Thursday in June, because Monday didn't count or something like that. Anyway, whatever the last day of school is, back it up 4 days. That's the first day of final exams for the seniors. And I'm sorry, for the everybody but the seniors, the 9th, 10th, 11th graders. So what our plan is to have all the high school kids come in and take their first exam on that first day, and then they're all going to go home. All of the 8th graders will come up to the high school on that morning from 9:30 roughly until around 2. They'll have a meeting in the auditorium, they'll go to the cafeteria and have a lunch, and then they'll meet all of their next year teachers before they even leave for the summer. They're going to have like 30-minute classes, and they'll meet all of their teachers so they can get an idea of what the high school's like, and there's no one else in the building but them. Instead of having that traditional thing that happens in the summertime and only half of the kids can show up, we'll have the entire 8th grade here. And we'll have them go through all their classes for next year, and hopefully that will give them a comfort factor. I'm hoping to have all the liaisons identified, and as you might have heard, we're going through an impact bargaining process on a new master schedule for the high school, where the kids are going to have an event during the school day called Tanner Time. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it with it because it still has to go, it's part of the impact bargaining conversation. But during that Tanner Time, the students with special needs are going to be in a small group every Monday, 10 or 15 kids with one teacher who really get to know those students for all 4 years and will guide that student for all 4 of those years. This could be their liaison, or it might be a different teacher, but someone who really gets to know every student in the school. So these are ways that I think you make it really personal for kids. It's been very successful. I mean, a lot of the schools that I work with at the NEASC are implementing these kinds of programs, and you probably know our kids have gone to Nashua South High School, our teachers have gone to Falmouth. I mean, they've really taken a good look at how these programs are looking, and I think the staff is on board with that option. So anyway, I think that will solve a lot of that anxiety for the special needs population, help them get to a better space. That's just a structural thing. It's the human thing that's really important, and I'm hoping to provide that opportunity with our students to make those connections with the teachers in a personal way. Hope that helps.
Yep, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Dr. Lord. This is tough, honestly, to interview you, because really, there are so many things that we would, or at least that I would ask a candidate, and I wouldn't know, what they had done. And we've been privileged to see all of the things that you've done in all of the roles that you've been serving with us. And I will say that, I'm looking through your letters of recommendation, and they talk about your work ethic. We know about your work ethic. I don't think you sleep. You've been working tirelessly, 8 days a week, 25 hours a day.
I'm fortunate to have wonderful people around me that inspire me to do it.
And see, there's another example of how you make everyone comfortable, and you're very welcoming and very inclusive with the work that you do. And I could go on, and just so that my colleagues know, sitting last week in one of those big, large crisis planning meetings, Dr. Lord was sitting at a laptop and was crafting a memo that was going to be sent out to the district. It was one of many. And he was typing this as the people were, discussing things. And then, as he would read a line back, 25 people were saying, no, it should say this, oh, it should say that, it should say that, oh, put that word in, do this, do that. He was so calm, he was so kind. I don't know how he did it, but I wrote on my paper, works well under pressure. So I saw it
It's a stressful
firsthand.
time for people, and I think it's a value if, and it's not just me. I mean, there's all of you folks. I think you've done a remarkable job at just trying to keep everybody's oars in the water and make sure we have all of our kids fed and keep our kids safe. And I think the more that we can do that, the more successful we're going to be able to go through this. I mean, the skill sets that teachers are learning are the kinds of skill sets I've been hoping that staff would be able to secure for years now. They're all learning how to use Google Hangouts. They're all learning how to teach their class from a computer. I mean, it's not an easy lift for some people, and some people are already they've been doing it for years. But and now it's a good opportunity for us to really jump into the 21st century. And I'll say more about that later. But yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, it was funny to me that I could write that on my notepad and actually be able to use that as one of the benchmarks that I really don't know how you did that. You were the calming presence in the room, and it was really very impressive. The question that I have for you is, one of the things that, I know that you have helped us with, and a direction you have been pushing in, as a superintendent, I would like to ask how you would carry on your work in increasing our CTE program. And the work that has been ongoing, but how would you work on that in the coming school year at another level?
Oh, I would certainly move the IT CTE program forward. I know we just secured criminal justice, which is awesome. That's going to be our 6th one at the high school. The next one we're shooting for is instructional technology, and hoping that we can information technology, and I'm hoping that we can get that one next, and I'm curious about where our CTE team thinks we can go after that. To support that, I would first of all move all the paperwork, and I have a very clear picture now that we did it with criminal justice at the high school, so Mrs. Ferry and her team, moved that forward, and I managed to see all the stuff that's behind the scenes to make that work, so I have a really good sense of how to make that happen for other CTE programs. I don't know if you had a chance to read the statement of interest for the new high school, but the CTE team has illustrated many of the things you just asked about, what we would do to make our CTE programs, take them to the next level. And if we do get fortunate enough to have a new high school, I think we should have some ideas in mind about what types of CTE programs we want to have. There are some limitations, I understand, because Essex Tech is over there, but we can have some programs that they don't have. And I'm so down with that. So yeah, let's see if we can make that happen. I do have a pretty clear picture of how to make it work, though, and make the paperwork move appropriately behind the scenes to get it to happen. Because we did it. We have a great criminal justice program that we're going to roll out for the kids in September. It's going to be fun.
And can I follow up? I know in one of the presentations that you had made, one of the discussions at your end was about the need to increase that programming budgetarily. There were considerations and there were scheduling considerations that you brought forward. If you could explain how, how that impacts on things, and as a superintendent, what you
program, they could do that too. So that's part of the way we're trying to help support. So they don't have to go over there now as rising ninth graders. They can make that decision later on. And our master schedule will facilitate that. Essex Tech is actually having the bus go from Peabody High over to Essex Tech at around 10:30, I think. And the kids would come back here around 2:30, and they could do sports and clubs and things after school. So they could still stay very much a piece of the Peabody life. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's an opportunity. We're building our master schedule to facilitate it and hopefully keep more kids here. No disrespect to Essex Tech at all. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, I love that answer.
I'll bet.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lord.
Sure.
I think it was, a little challenging for us to interview you because, we all hold you in high regard, and we feel we've gotten to know you pretty well the last couple of years. But we really thank you for being here and answering our questions and getting the opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about you. So
Sure.
I didn't know if you wanted to make any closing statement as we wrap up, or if there's any questions for us. We certainly wanted to give you that opportunity.
I'm a competitor. I've been competing all my life. And there's a lot of political polarity in the superculture outside the walls of Peabody. And as I study the other candidates for this position, I wouldn't bring their lack of experience to the table in inner city schools, to your opinion, to gather some sort of political favor. That's just something I wouldn't do. I think there's enough political stuff out there. If I were you and I was sitting in your position, I would be looking for a candidate who understood the district strategic plan that's being put in place right now. I mean, Dr. Cribble's doing a great job of managing Kara's vision with a group of constituents, and you're going to still have a district strategic plan within the next couple of months that you haven't had since 2004 or 5. It's a really strong district strategic plan that we can hang our budget on, hang our school improvement plans on, and paint our portrait for the future. So I would think you would want a candidate that really understood that. At the same time, Dr. Kerbels has brought in our teachers to establish a professional development plan that's going to accelerate teacher learning. I would think you would want a candidate that would really have a good sense of where professional development is going for a teacher, so we can help them to be masters of their craft. And the last thing that I'd be really surprised if any candidate was aware of is our new 21st Century Learning Department. I don't even know of another city that's got one. The ability of that team to integrate technology, teaching, and learning into one little package, and the stuff they've done in just the last 3 days to really build 21st century teaching and learning is simply remarkable. I would think you'd want a candidate that had an intimate understanding of how that works in our city and how we could take it to the next level. I thought of an analogy that might be helpful for everybody to see. The one I use with the high school is when we went to the moon in the 1960s. It was a really difficult thing to do. It was not a very easy thing to do. There was a lot of challenges associated with going to the moon, and we had to build a Saturn V rocket. You all know, and it's out there in the public, the high school is like 4 percentile points off of receivership. It's a heavy lift. The students know that, the teachers know that, and we're working to illustrate all those elements of accountability to the public in a better way. We're getting better and better every time, but it's a heavy lift. We are building a Saturn V rocket at the high school, and we are taking off. And it's going to get there. At the district level, working with Dr. Kerbel over the last few months, it's a whole nother thing. I don't know if you're Trekkies, but we're building the Starship Enterprise, and we're going to boldly go where no one has gone before. I mean, I'm not kidding. So I'm figuring if you need the next James T. Kirk or the next Jean-Luc Picard as your superintendent, you're looking at him. That's all.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. Thank you. That's great. All right. So the school committee now, we've had our interviews. We'll be at a future meeting discussing the next steps. I think we're going to be meeting briefly after tonight, and then we'll be making a report out and figuring our next steps. So just wanted to thank you, Dr. Lord, and thank the committee members, and set to adjourn. Mr. Hockman?
I think I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session with the intent to return to public session after that.
Motion made by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Limpio. All in favor? That's what we'll do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc.
And I did want to entertain a motion to go back into regular session.
So moved.
Mrs. Dunn? Okay, you've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Limpio to go back into open session. So, looking to have a discussion about our superintendent candidates. I think all of us would agree we had 2 very strong nights of interviews from some very qualified candidates. And I just wanted to open up that for discussion and see where we want to go with the next steps here and what moves we want to make. Mr. Limpio, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to thank all the candidates for coming out the last couple of nights, especially under the circumstances. I was really impressed with all 6 candidates, and I believe all 6 of them are going to have great futures in education, and appreciate the time that they took, and really I was very impressed with the group that we had. It was a tough decision, and I certainly don't take this lightly, but for me, I'd like to make a motion to move Dr. Josh Videla as our next superintendent. That's where I stand right now. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll second that motion, and on the motion.
For discussion, absolutely. So you've heard the motion by Mr. Limpio, seconded by Mr. Hockman. I think all of us want to speak on this, so Mr. Hockman, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo Mr. Limpio's sentiments. We really did have a tremendous pool of candidates that were before us, and I was concerned about that, knowing the number of districts that are looking for superintendents currently. I'm also pleased to support Mr. Vadala, Dr. Vadala, excuse me, and I'm glad that Mr. Limpio brought him forward. We need to act with some degree, I think we need to act with some degree of urgency here, and we're not following some protocols that we have in prior superintendent searches. And I just want the public to be aware of a few reasons why I say that. One is there are several open superintendent positions currently. Several of the finalists here were finalists elsewhere, and we want to ensure that we're able to secure the person who we want for the position. We also are operating under some very strange times. We've been meeting in this session probably, if there weren't so many superintendent openings right now, and I didn't feel that there was urgency for this hire, I would have asked that we suspend meeting for our own health and our own safety and the safety of the candidates who were gracious enough to come before us, both Monday and tonight. So with that, we would normally have site visits, but that's impossible now under the restrictions that have been imposed upon us for good reason. And we would normally have other stakeholders in the district meet with and talk to and have the opportunity to engage people who we would advance to a second round, perhaps. But under the circumstances, I fully support Mr. Olympio's motion and hope that the public understands why we're acting with such urgency and in the manner that in which we are.
If I can comment on that, very well said, Mr. Huckman. I do think all of us know that there are other districts that are in the process now, and as you said, these finalists that we've been interviewing tonight are also finalists elsewhere. I can say that Melrose is in the tail end of their search, Linfield, and Hamilton Wenham. So not only are there other districts, there are districts that are very, very close to us, very near to us, that are also looking at this pool of candidates. And it is, I think, a terrific pool of candidates that we interviewed. And I'm very pleased that the city of Peabody, we've been able to attract such strong candidates. I think each of the 6 made strong arguments for why they were the right person. Each are very well qualified and presented very well. And that makes me feel good. I know it makes all of us feel good that we had such talented people coming forward. But I agree with Mr. Hockman, Mr. Olympio, that there is some urgency here. We don't want to lose potential candidates that we think could do a great job here to other districts. And that has happened to us in the past, where there's been people that I know we've been very interested in for a number of positions, superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, that we have missed out on because other districts have come in, similar to what could happen here, have come in and taken some of our strong candidates. So I do see urgency here. I do think this is the right decision to move forward in this type of manner. So I'll open it up for further discussion on the candidates. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. I just want to say I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. There were a lot of very, very good candidates. It was a difficult decision. We were under a little bit of a time crunch. I will say that I'm confident with our board. This is something that some of us have done before, and we do have experience in this process. I will be supporting moving Dr. Vadala forward to enter into negotiations with the mayor. And I just want to thank everybody that did come out for coming out under these circumstances. It was a very difficult time for a lot of people, and it was a hard decision, and I just want to thank them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Arnottis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all who have been with us throughout this process. We've been, I think, almost spoiled with the selection of candidates we've had here over the past few days. I think each of their interviews were home runs, frankly, and each of them had incredible experience and skills that would have come to Peabody. I will be supporting Mr. Olympio's motion of Dr. Vadala. I think he's an excellent fit for our district, and I'm looking forward to hopefully working with him, and I want to thank all the candidates for their time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arnottis.
Nope, you go right ahead, Ms.
Go
Dunn.
ahead. I'll wait. It's okay.
Mr. Amico?
Thank you. Through the chair of the committee. First of all, I want to thank Glenn Kuchar of the MASC for all the work you've done, a valuable effort to bring forward all those resumes and all those candidates to us, respected candidates. We were able to review their resumes. We were able to check references from just some great educational leaders across the state, across the country, and then we were able to have them in front of us as interviews. And I will agree with Mr. Olympio that Dr. Vadala should be our next superintendent here in Peabody.
Thank you. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This superintendent search and our process and our situation is totally different than a normal superintendent search. Normally, if we were to do this, you would have a superintendent who is in place, who has made known that they were going to leave at a time definite. And we would build our calendar based on that typical event. And that's how other school systems have actually had that luxury right now, that they are conducting a more routine superintendent search, which would include a time frame totally different than the one that we need to be able to operate on. And that's aside from the current status of the virus and the epidemic. Many of those superintendent searches, and ours included, would have had, a chance to meet and greet the candidates. We would have had, maybe a second round of interviews. Those are all things that are in a normal search, but this was not a typical process because of the situation here. And now, because of the times that we're in, we're here tonight making that decision. And I think that people need to understand that this is the most difficult responsibility of a school committee, and I am actually proud of all my colleagues because this was a very difficult thing to do. The decision for me is difficult because we had some amazing candidates in front of us, and each one of them brought so many things forward. They, if you could make an amalgam of all of their talents and their experiences, that would be the best result ever. So trying to choose from the people that we have interviewed and met over these last 2 nights is difficult. And I will support the selection of the candidate, Dr. Vadala. And I actually do think that moving forward, we have a great opportunity to form a very, very talented and strong administrative team for our whole district. And I think he can play a big part in that. And I would like to also, be able to make this as a unanimous vote to show our support to him, but also to recognize the work of our internal candidate too, Dr. Lord, who is an integral part of this district. And I think that we really do have the opportunity right now to form a team that's going to move us light years ahead very quickly.
Great. And I certainly think regarding Dr. Lord that I think all of us expressed tonight the high regard we all feel, all have for him and what he's meant to our city. And I know all of us feel that we want him to be part of our long-term success. So thank you. So we do have a motion on the table. No further comments. Call for a roll call vote. Mr. Hockman, can you do the roll call vote, please?
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Mr. Arnottis?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Ms. Dunn?
Yes.
And I think, do I have to step down as secretary, or can I,
Oh, you can vote.
No, I think
No,
you can
You
vote,
can
yeah.
vote. Yeah.
can you say Mr. Hockman? Does that feel funny saying it?
Mr. Hockman? Yes. All right, I will,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
I think Mr. Kuchar wanted to interject.
What was the actual motion itself?
It was a motion to authorize me to,
Enter into contract negotiations.
Into contract, okay.
Yeah.
yep. The motion was to authorize me as mayor, chair of the school committee, to reach out to the candidate selected and negotiate a contract.
Yeah.
Do you want to contact him and
Yes, I'll get that information from, I would like to contact him right away. Yes?
To that point, Mr. Mayor.
Do you want
want
to
a
take,
recess?
let's take a recess.
Let's take a 10-minute recess.
Motion to take a recess?
Sounds good.
Okay.
We'll take a break.
The mayor is verbose. So,
I can report that I've just spoken with the candidate, explained to him or informed him of the vote. He was very interested, very excited, and I'm confident that we will be able to negotiate a very fair contract for him to be our next superintendent. So I'm comfortable moving forward as is.
motion to adjourn?
Okay, thank you.